Hey, and Happy New Year. 2026 is shaping up to be another big one in health policy. Our team is hard at work on stories digging into the future of rural health, opioid addiction in older adults, court-ordered mental health care, and more. You'll start seeing those stories later this month, but first we're diving into a corner of America's prescription drug policy that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Generic drugs now fill 9 out of every 10 prescriptions in the U.S., but experts warn that America's market for these cheap essential medicines is on shaky ground. We explore why in Race to the Bottom, a special 3-part series that we first aired in 2024. Here we go. Generic drugs are, in many ways, the unsung hero of our healthcare system. They bring remarkable medical innovations within reach for millions more Americans. Drugs that fight cancer, stop heart attacks and seizures, treat otherwise fatal infections, often for just a few bucks a bottle or less.
When I found out that I could get the generic version for the first time, there was an exhale. Honestly, this changed my life.
This medication that was once $130,000 a year to, nothing, the copay is $0. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
These much cheaper copies of brand name medications now fill 9 out of every 10 prescriptions in the U.S. They save us hundreds of billions of dollars a year. But will affordable, high-quality generic drugs continue to be there when we need them?
Acorn Pharmaceuticals officially closed its doors nearly a week ago.
Big players are leaving the business,
leaving hundreds in the community without a job.
The company says increased competition is causing the closure here.
Expensive cutting-edge therapies are proving harder to copy on the cheap.
Critics say that some drug companies are playing games to stave off generic competitors, leaving patients out in the cold.
Shortages of generic drugs are now the norm, leaving doctors and patients scrambling to find the medicines that they need.
FDA, more than 130 drugs were in short supply as of this week.
Why is this industry that's been so successful and so essential to our health in so much trouble?
Antibiotics, antivirals, ADD medications, you name it. We purchase from
Welcome to Race to the Bottom, our special series on the problems plaguing the generic drugs that we all rely on. Over the course of the 3 episodes, we'll explore how we got here and what it would take to reverse these worrying trends. From the studio at the Leonard Davis Institute at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm Dan Gorenstein. This is Tradeoffs. Today, Part 1, Boom Times. Where did we go wrong? That's the natural question that we ask ourselves anytime something strong starts to fall apart. Tradeoffs senior reporter Leslie Walker and I started kicking around that question about the generic drug industry earlier this year. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Dan.
So we asked you to pinpoint when this trouble first began.
Right. And at this point, I've talked to north of 30 folks, and most agree our story really starts in 1984 with the passage of this really important law known as the Hatch-Waxman Act, not surprisingly named after its authors, Republican Senator Orrin Hatch and Democratic Congressman Henry Waxman. And this really is the law that gave birth to the modern generic drug industry that we have that's been this amazing boon to society.
Right. I mean, we pay very high prices for a small number of brand name drugs. But thanks to this other kind of drug, cheaper generic copies, we actually pay less than almost any other country for most of the prescriptions that we fill.
Amazing, right? But what I learned through my reporting is that this law also sowed the seeds of some of the problems we see today. Problems like big players quitting the business, critical drugs being out of stock, and some serious quality questions. So it made sense to me, Dan, to, start by better understanding this law that is the origins of both the good, even the amazing, and the bad here. And I started by talking with this guy who was in the room when this rare moment of bipartisan deal-making went down. Do you want to go by Alfred or Al in our story?
I started out in life as Alfie, and my dog now has that name. So that's out. Most people call me Al.
So Al Engelberg is now 85 years old, enjoying the retired life up in Aspen, Colorado. But back in the day, Dan, he was the generic drug industry's top attorney, a time when he says Democrats and Republicans were really feeling the heat on high drug costs. Spending had more than doubled between 1970 and 1980. Patients felt the sting back then because unlike today, Dan, very few insurers even covered drugs. And it was tough for older Americans who had to pay for all these prescriptions on their own. That got the attention of our political leaders. Here's President Ronald Reagan.
Senior citizens require more medication than any other segment of our society. I speak with some authority on that. They use about 25%. We use about 25% of all the drugs sold.
The Gipper, a real jokester there. Now, beyond wooing voters, lawmakers were also worried about money. Between the military, veterans, and Medicaid, the government's drug bill was really blowing up.
In 1983 alone, the federal government spent an estimated $2.4 billion for drugs.
That's roughly triple what the feds had spent on drugs just a decade before.
Okay, Leslie, so that's the landscape. Consumers and the government feeling the pinch on prescription drugs.
Yep, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle feeling some urgency to act. But the multi-billion-dollar question is, what do they do about it? Because this is about as thorny as a policy issue as you'll find, right? I mean, the simplest sounding solution, at least the most direct one, is just cap the prices. Don't let drug companies charge more than a certain amount.
I mean, I want to jump in here for a quick second, Leslie. This is important to point out that this is what the governments of most other Western countries do to keep prescription drugs affordable, either cap or directly negotiate the prices of brand name drugs.
Yes, but here in the US, branded drug makers successfully fought that idea for decades, basically scaring the pants off politicians anytime it came up, saying, if you cap our profits, we're going to have to develop fewer new drugs, and you might miss the next cure for cancer. That argument, according to Al Engelberg, highly effective, even back in the 80s.
The drug companies basically said, research is very expensive. If we can't make a profit, your grandmother will die.
So sweeping government price regulation, basically a political dead end. But then there's this Democratic congressman from California, Henry Waxman, who sees a very different type of solution.
At some point, public policy calls for the free market system competition, which will bring about the result of a lower price for the consumer.
Waxman makes this important choice. He passes over the brand name drugs under patent and instead zeroes in on this other set of drugs whose patents have expired, but still have super high prices.
And the prices, Leslie, here are high because why?
Well, because even though in theory, once a drug's patent expires, other companies could come in, knock them off, make generic versions and sell them on the cheap, almost no one was doing that.
Why not?
Well, Al told me very few companies even existed back then to sell cheaper copies of these drugs after their patents had expired.
The generic drug industry, if you want to call it that, was 6 or 7 companies, about 80% of those Jewish family businesses in which the husband was a chemist and the wife was a bookkeeper.
So Al basically said the business was seen as super risky and unattractive. I mean, for starters, the FDA made generic companies at the time jump through a ton of expensive and time-consuming hoops to get these copycats approved. Plus, they could get hit with patent lawsuits from these big brand name players with much deeper pockets.
So you're saying to me, Leslie, I think that you've got these sort of like mom and pop generic companies that are facing a total business minefield to just get their drugs to market.
Exactly. And here's the result of that, as Al put it.
There were probably 100 drugs on which patents had expired, in which there was no generic competition.
So that's like 100 drugs, Dan, out there, in theory, that generic competitors could be copying and selling. But again, they weren't because this business was barely viable.
Got it. And so this is that other option that Henry Waxman sees. Get this industry working better. We can bust this open and deliver consumers a bunch of savings. And another benefit, sidestep that political third rail regulating drug prices.
Right, but Waxman needs the brand drug companies to play ball here. Remember, they hold a lot of sway in Congress. I mean, they could kill your grandma, maybe cure your cancer. And the brands are willing to talk. I mean, not surprisingly, they've got their own agenda at the top of the list, extending their own patents, these monopolies they have on their drugs. They've got a champion in Republican Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah, and together, Hatch and Waxman bring this deal across the finish line. Now, don't let the nostalgia for bipartisan compromise fool you, Dan, because Orrin Hatch himself wrote this amazing essay that I found decades later recounting just how bitter these negotiations were.
What did he say?
Well, he wrote that basically the two sides argued almost over every single word in the bill, that he sometimes felt less like a lawmaker and more like a therapist. And then there's this gem. So the two guys leading the negotiations on behalf of the two teams, the generics and the brand drug companies,
right,
one time they got angry at the exact same time.
Okay.
They jumped to their feet, rushed to the door, and get there at the same time, right? And Hatch writes, quote, not wanting the other to win on anything, they both tried to jump through and smack their heads. Hatch said he had to turn away just to keep from cracking up.
I mean, you can almost hear that sound, right? That thwack.
Exactly, totally. And then the door going like a bung, like in a cartoon. But as ferocious and kind of ridiculous that those negotiations were, I mean, Al told me that even when he was in a lot of those heated meetings, his generic clients never forgot which side their bread was buttered on. I mean, they knew that the whole goal was to try to find a way to bring drug costs down without harming what they and everyone else agreed was really the engine of drug innovation in America, and that's the brand drug industry.
I was representing a bunch of people who copy drugs. We can't exist without these guys. If they don't invent them, there's nothing for us to copy. My job was not to kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. It was to prevent the goose from getting too fat.
In 1984, the two parties finally reached a deal. Now, whether the deal actually prevented that goose, the brand drug industry, from getting too fat remains a big open question about this law's legacy that we'll get into more later in the series. But for now, Dan, what you need to know about this historic deal is it gave brand companies some extra patent protections, and the generic companies, well, Al said they felt they got something pretty damn remarkable.
Sitting there in the Rose Garden, I'll never forget it. And with the leaders of the industry, we thought that we had hit a home run.
Leslie, what does he see as this home run?
So in place of what used to be like this one lane, super bumpy, super slow road to market, they get what's effectively a super highway. Way fewer FDA hoops to jump through, patent lawsuits become a whole lot easier to settle. Basically, it's just a whole lot faster, cheaper, and easier for generic companies to start selling their stuff.
And the hope, I assume, was that once you open up this super highway that you're talking about, you get a bunch more cars that want to drive on it, and more competition is going to mean lower prices and more savings for consumers.
That's exactly right. Here's how President Reagan summed up all those hopes in the Rose Garden.
So when you add it all up, this bill will provide regulatory relief, increased competition, economy and government, and best of all, the American people will save money and yet receive the best medicine that pharmaceutical science can provide.
Win, 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 right?
I mean, Vegas with the triple cherries. Less red tape, cheaper drugs, the same life-saving treatments.
Right, but there was this big unknown. Would this law actually deliver on those lofty promises? And no one honestly had any idea, because this law really was unprecedented. Check out what UCLA economist Bill Commodore said to me.
The framers of Hatch-Waxman came up with the most astounding solution. They, I think for the first time in American economic history, created an industry that did not exist before.
Now, obviously the industry did exist at some level before, but I wanted to play you that bite because it underscores that Congress really swung for the fences here. No one knew if this faster, cheaper path to market would actually attract more companies, would save anybody much money, might even backfire in some way.
And no one knows the answers to those questions, just to be clear here, Leslie, because this is basically uncharted territory at a time when many other countries were turning to government regulations to slow down drug spending. We here in the U.S. were putting our faith in the power of private companies to basically compete our affordability problem away.
Yeah, let one set of companies, this new revamped generic drug industry, act basically as a check and balance on the excesses of these other brand name companies. A very American solution.
Great. We'll leave it there for a second. After the break, a gold rush unfolds, prices start to plummet, and we see the limits of competition. Welcome back. When we left you, President Reagan had just signed a bill that Republicans and Democrats hoped would harness the power of the free market to bring high-quality, cheaper drugs to Americans faster. We're joined again by senior reporter-producer Leslie Walker. Look, Leslie, I know from my own reporting that it took a while for this industry to get up and running. Doctors and patients trusting generics as safe alternatives to branded products, companies ramping up production, lawsuits. We know the generic drug industry is huge today. So when did things really get huge?
So a lot of people I interviewed pointed to the early 2000s as the era when this faith that lawmakers had put in the free market really starts to pay off. By 2007, for example, generics were filling nearly 2 out of every 3 prescriptions. Patients, insurers, the government, they're all saving tens of billions of dollars a year. Generics, on average, the first year they're on the market, they cut prices in half. By year 2, they're cutting prices by 75%.
75%? I mean, this all sounds really impressive. Is all this success the direct result of that hoop clearing that Hatch-Waxman did, making it easier for generic companies to get to market?
That was a lot of it, for sure. Plus, state laws also changed to let pharmacists start automatically swapping in these generic drugs. And there was this one other big piece of Hatch-Waxman. It was this incentive that lawmakers included. You might call it a golden ticket, where whichever generic company was first to apply with the FDA got 6 months of profit all to themselves.
In other words, exclusivity, like no other generic company could enter for those 6 months.
Exactly. And the idea was to reward the company who put in the work to clear the hoops that still did exist, right? The FDA testing, paying lawyers to settle patent issues. And this reward, it starts getting generic executives chomping at the bit.
In the heyday, we were launching, 40, 50 products a year. So boom, 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 let's go.
That's Christine. Let's call her Boom Boom Baeder. And I mean, to paint a picture of Christine for you, when she says boom, 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 let's go, that really is kind of her vibe in a nutshell. Now, today, Christine's a president at Apotex, which is a massive generic drug company. But back in 2008, she was leading what's called the launch team at Teva, this other really big generic drug maker. And her team's whole job there was to take on these brand name behemoths.
It was super exciting. It was a fun thing to do. You knew you were making a difference.
And to be clear, Christine also said you knew you were about to make a boatload of money. Because for these particular launches, Dan, Christine's team had that golden ticket.
Right, those 6 months of generic sales all to themselves.
Yeah, which Christine told me could make you more than $1 million a day on some drugs. So as soon as that 6-month clock starts, 180 days, Dan, you're in this sprint. And that, Christine said, meant the night before these product launches often looked like this.
I had on, I think, jeans and a sweatshirt. I brought a pillow. I think I had a little blanket.
Wait, did you, and marshmallows? What are we talking about here, Leslie? What is going on?
So
s'mores?
It was actually the day before Thanksgiving, and Christine had just gotten the green light from her bosses to launch a new generic asthma drug.
And it was very important to us, since we would be the only one on the market, that we would get it into as many pharmacies as possible very, very quickly.
So Christine basically figures out the fastest way to get this drug into as many pharmacies as possible is actually using a fleet of truckers. So each is driving a tractor trailer carrying cases and cases of this new drug.
Which is kind of ridiculous. But honestly, the only way to ensure that all of the loads hit at the same time and that you can utilize the weekend for shipping.
And wait, Leslie, why are they rushing like this?
So again, like, time is money here, Gorenstein. I mean, they have this 180-day period to make as much money as possible. So Christine's hired a fleet of truckers on the night before Thanksgiving because shipping, it's slow during the holidays. But if you hire your own truckers, Christine's like, this is the fastest way to get these drugs out there.
Oh my God. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars a day riding on the speed with which these truckers can drop their drugs off.
And Christine knows that. So she knows some of these truckers might be driving overnight, on the holiday away from their families. So she decides to leave a little extra inspiration in the cab of each truck.
I actually wrote a personal letter that we gave to every truck driver. And I explained what the drug was for. And I explained that our price was more than 55% off the brand's list price. So it would really make a difference to people.
She signs it with her name, her number, and the trucks start to roll off the lot. And she goes under her desk, takes her pillow, her blanket, and thinks she's going to get some shut-eye. But then something unexpected starts to happen.
My phone continued to ring with truck drivers.
It's 11 p.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Her phone keeps ringing.
They were calling and saying, hey, I'm hitting weather in Omaha. I might be a little late, but I'm still going.
I guess the letters worked.
The letter worked. So, yeah, this fleet of truckers is calling, like, super motivated, Like she said, I'm hitting weather in Nebraska. I might be late, but I'm going to get there. And Dan, this was the Hatch-Waxman dream, right? They had successfully designed a market that was so appealing for companies to jump into that they're pulling all-nighters. They're hiring fleets of truckers. No one is forcing them to do that. It is simply the magic of the market at work.
From your lips to Ronald Reagan's ears, Leslie Walker. I mean, seriously, I apologize for this cliche, but this really does seem kind of like the ultimate win-win. You've got Boom Boom raking in millions of dollars a day, and at the same time, all these everyday Americans are saving a whole bunch of money on their drugs.
Totally. And other people start catching on. I mean, there's only so many ways in America to make $1 million a day. And actually, this is where our story starts to turn.
It was an attractive industry. We were having a lot of fun, and a lot of other companies jumped into the fray.
Christine tells me that, basically other healthcare companies start to see an opportunity to make money. And before long, like Al said in the beginning, maybe there were 6 or 7 generic drug companies in the 70s. But by the early 2000s, more than 100 companies a year are getting new generics approved.
So this industry really exploded.
Yeah, and my favorite kind of little piece of color here is that at one point, companies literally started pitching tents outside of the FDA's headquarters to make sure they were the first ones to file because they wanted that 180-day exclusivity so badly. I mean, they were literally sending staffers with tents to camp outside of the FDA.
Is this the opportunity for s'mores? Do they have s'mores here?
Really got to get you a marshmallow. I mean, the crazy thing is the FDA decided it was basically a public health hazard that there were so many people camping outside of their offices, like it was a Duke basketball game, that they actually had to change the rules in some pretty significant ways. But I mean, yeah, it really was like this gold rush, right? These are people trying to, stake their claim. It's like, gets pretty crazy.
This sounds wild with the camping, but I mean, you said it right. You said a gold rush. So my question, Leslie, isn't this good? I mean, like, this is the supreme efficiency of the market at work.
Great question. So basically what starts to happen is the market kind of goes into overdrive. It's like, who can cut your prices the lowest, the fastest? And suddenly you're not just competing with 3 or 4 other businesses, you're competing with 10 or 20. And the only thing you're really competing on is price. And if these companies were just cranking out, I don't know, sleeping bags, coffee makers, couches, well, then maybe that's fine.
Right, but we're talking here about critical medicines that people need for their everyday health. I mean, life and death stuff.
Exactly. And because of that, it's really important, right, to make sure these drugs are made safely and that there's enough of them that people can always get them whenever they need. But in the last 4 decades since Hatch-Waxman, no major laws or regulations have effectively slowed this race to the bottom on price to make sure that as these prices fall and we all get these great savings, that we also still get the quality and the reliability that we need from these drugs.
So Leslie, I guess to go all the way back to the beginning, our original question, where did we go wrong? It's like, this is it. This is where our trouble began when the market seemingly became too successful.
Bingo. And if this episode was really about the good old days, then episode 2, that's going to give us an up-close look at what's happening today, where people can't always count on the generic drug supply because of some of these problems.
We go in for what both Abby and I know is a very important chemotherapy. And the doctor just comes in and says, you're not going to get this one today because it's on shortage.
Leslie Walker, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Since this episode first aired, Al Engelberg published his own version of this slice of healthcare history, a memoir titled Breaking the Medicine Monopolies, Reflections of a Generic Drug Pioneer. I'm Dan Gorenstein. This is Tradeoffs.
If you enjoyed today's episode of Tradeoffs, don't keep it to yourself. Tell someone else about it. Friend, colleague, family member. Better still, leave a rating or a review wherever you subscribe to us, the NPR app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. The Tradeoffs team is producer Melanie Evans, senior producer Leslie Walker, managing editor Ryan Levy, executive director Jessica Silverman, marketing director Catherine Dougal, sound designer Andrew Perella, chief operations officer Colleen Scheck, with help from Kate Seepy, Cedric Wilson, and Haley Lerner. The executive editor is Dan Gorenstein. The Tradeoffs theme song was composed by Ty Sitterman, with additional music this episode from Blue Dot Sessions and Epidemic Sound. Race to the Bottom is supported in part by West Health, the National Institute of Healthcare Management Foundation, and Arnold Ventures. Special thanks to Marta Voshinska. Additional thanks to Rena Conti, Jeremy Green, Kurt Karst, Joey Mattingly, Alexa Score, Marty Scheimer, Will Schrank, and Lisa Ann Trainer. Thanks also to all our listeners who support our work throughout the year. Join their ranks at tradeoffs.org/donate. Our media partner is Side Effects Public Media, based at WFYI. Tradeoffs is supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Arnold Ventures, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Sozoze Foundation, Just Trust, West Health, the California Healthcare Foundation, the Foundation for Opioid Response Efforts, and the Leonard Davis Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. Our financial supporters are not involved in any decisions about our journalism. The views expressed in this episode are those of the individuals and not those of Tradeoffs staff, advisors, or funders.